For some people, working in a remote location would be an ordeal, but for others it sounds ideal. Catherine Purvis speaks to 4 people to discover how their dream job worked out.
Karen Aspen, on-board cook, Scotland and the Caribbean.
The first time Karen Aspen set foot on a boat, she ended up on an 8-month adventure sailing around the Caribbean. As a temp for a catering company, she was sent to work as the on-board cook for a group on a weekend sailing trip around Scotland's west coast. But then she decided to stay with the yacht, helping out with a 2-month renovation before joining its next voyage across the Atlantic. "I just said I could do that, as you do when you're 19, laughs Aspen. Once in Antigua, she cooked for wealthy tourists who chartered the yacht before it was hired by the filmmaker Gregory Colbert to track whales for his film Ashes and Snow. "I was one of those girls who had dolphins on her pencil case," says Aspen. She never thought she'd see a whale or dolphin in real life, let alone learn to listen out for them on a hydrophone, or have a job where you could walk up on deck and there'd be a whale 10 feet from you. "It was a real turning point for me," says Aspen. "I was meeting all these people who were following their passions and doing what they really wanted with their lives. It's something I would aspire to do, to live life on my own terms."
Jada Yoon, New York Times, 52 Places Traveller.
When the New York Times announced it wanted to send a journalist to every location on its annual list of the top 52 places to go, the posting went viral. Memes were generated and 13,000 people applied. Who wouldn't want the chance to visit places like Croatia, Mexico and Chile? Jada Yuan was chosen as the lucky writer and soon embarked on a tour covering 38 countries over 6 continents. Yuan knew she was going to be busy pumping out Instagram updates about her exploits, photographs and a print column each week. But then she learned last minute that she'd also be organising the transport and accommodation herself. "It wasn't until 2 days before I left that I realised that would mostly be on me," she says. Despite missing trains in India, running out of money in Sao Tome, and battling an ever-growing list of articles to file, Yuan found ways to overcome any travel rage and enjoy the small wins. Even if you were in a place where you weren't having the greatest time, you could always take a pause to watch the sunset, she says. "I have flashbacks all the time. I'll just be doing something, and it reminds me of a fruit I ate somewhere, or a time I was driving in the rain. I can't even pinpoint what triggers them, but I'm grateful for them. None of them are bad."
Craig Stanford, archaeologist of St Kilda, Scotland.
There wasn't really an average day on St Kilda. It's a pretty wild place, says Craig Stanford, who worked as resident archaeologist on the isolated archipelago. The islands of St Kilda are home to seabirds, sheep and the St Kilda field mouse, but most human residents left in 1930. The post is a semi-legendary job in Scottish archaeology, says Stanford, who spent 6 months conserving, promoting and protecting the archipelago's cultural heritage, including 1,260 unique stone huts that were once used by farmers. A helicopter will try to deliver food twice a week, provided wind conditions are favourable. But in a place where every hour of your day is defined by nature, this is no easy feat. You end up eating some weird things from the back of the cupboard, Stanford confesses. And with poor satellite internet connection, a major obstacle to communicating with the outside world, the tiny St Kildan community must make their own fun. Whether it's a burger night, film night, or gathering to celebrate a birthday, the social life on the island can be brilliant, says Stanford. I made some extremely good friends I imagine I'll have for the rest of my life.
Murray Hughes, Warden of Ynys Enlli, Wales.
It was somewhat by chance that Mary Hughes and Emyr Glyn Owen became the new wardens of Ynys Enlli, a remote island off the Welsh coast, famous for its wildlife and sites of archaeological interest. The couple met on the island as day trip visitors on a perfect summer afternoon 2 years ago. So when they spotted the vacancy to run the place, we shared one of those looks between us, the looks that speak louder than words. We had to go for it, says Hughes. Many people assume that people who want to live on an island are escaping from something, but for us, it was more about realising a dream. The pair quit their jobs and have been working hard ever since they arrived last September. As the island is now largely uninhabited, they have to be self-sufficient. We are responsible for the upkeep of 10 listed buildings, says Hughes. There's always a wall to paint or a ceiling to plaster. She adds, I've had to get my head around things I've never had to consider before, like how the water system works, and the language of volts and amps and solar panels. Hughes has also dug drains and mixed cement, and has been building fences at weekends too. But no matter how tough the work, the pair can always end their day with a walk through the fields and a swim in the sea at sunset. There aren't many aspects of mainland life that we miss, says Hughes.
Hi everyone, welcome to our podcast, Learning Matters. I'm Sam Polaris, and in this episode, Zara and I are talking about grit, the much discussed ingredient in personal success, and how it impacts our learning.
Hi, I'm Zara Redman. Great to be here. I'd like to invite all our listeners to leave a comment, and we'll try to respond to as many as we can during the show. So, Sam, let's begin by answering the question, what exactly is grit?
I'm glad you asked. It's a term that's been around for a while, and often it's assumed that people understand it. In her TED Talk entitled Grit, the Power of Passion and Perseverance, Angela Lee Duckworth describes grit as passion and perseverance for very long-term goals.
So, does that mean being committed to something you have a passion for and sticking at it?
Yes, that's right. A person with grit is far stronger mentally than most people. They have stamina and determination. They don't give up easily, despite distractions or knockbacks. And they have the ability to work hard towards their goals, not just for short periods, but for an extended time.
Interesting stuff. A lot of comments are coming in. People are asking why grit is important.
Well, education is, without doubt, the most important point in relation to grit. Angela Lee Duckworth's research has shown that academic success isn't dependent on education or even IQ, but instead on grit. Her studies have shown that it's a key determiner in how successful someone will be in both their academic career and in life. So it's important for students to be made aware that if they want to achieve their goals, they need to develop grit. One of the ways to do this is by developing what is called a growth mindset. By that, I mean they have to understand that the ability to learn is not fixed and that they have to invest time and effort in their learning. It's believed that people who are significantly more passionate about their goals and who have more perseverance and self-control, in other words, more grit, will be high achievers, no matter what their background is. To me, it's about when you have a goal that is more important than anything else in your life, by a long way, and grit sums up all the qualities you need to achieve that goal, no matter what.
That's a fantastic way of describing it. So, earlier on, you quoted Angela Lee Duckworth. What can you tell us about her?
Well, she's the scientist behind the buzzword grit. She works as a professor of psychology at the University of Pennsylvania, and for more than a decade, she has been conducting research into the relationship between grit and achievement. Angela has a unique perspective because her background is in psychology and education. She used to teach maths to 7th graders at public school in New York. While she was teaching, she observed that doing well academically wasn't nearly as simple as she had once thought. It wasn't just a question of having a reasonable IQ or being talented. She realised that the most successful students shared a common quality. This is what she describes as grit. She is well known for her book and TED Talk on the subject. She's talked about her research with teachers who work in some of the toughest schools, and she's emphasised the importance of helping students develop grit and other non-cognitive skills which are critical for a successful career.
Yes, her TED Talk is really interesting. I can recommend it. I was really intrigued by the grit scale she refers to in her book. Can you tell us something about that, Sam?
Well, it consists of a number of questions designed to make you reflect on how passionate and persevering you are. And if you want to find out more about what grit means, the clearest way to really understand is to go to the website and answer the questions.
Critics of grit say that it omits the obstacles society puts in the way of some people.
Yes, people seem to think that what Angela is saying is that all you need to do is work harder and you'll achieve more. However, critics point out that some people work a great deal harder than others, but still find it difficult to achieve their goals.
Other critics have commented that people will persevere when something is worth investing in, so they lay the blame with educators for not providing an inspiring curriculum.
Well, I think there's some truth in that.
Do you? I'm not quite as convinced as you are by it. I don't think it's the educators that are at fault. It's natural for students to put a lot more effort into the subjects that they enjoy, and it can't be easy to design a curriculum that appeals to everyone.
Well, one thing's for sure, it's by far the grittiest subject we've discussed on this show.
Let's choose another question, team.
Well, I'm still a student, so in fact I tend to eat in places where the food is relatively, affordable. For example, a pizza, sushi, or burger place. It's quite different to the food we have at home. My parents usually cook traditional meals where I'm from. To be honest, I prefer that. I guess I'm simply more used to it. They say that there's nothing better than home cooking. Anyway, I mustn't forget to answer the question. Many, but not all, restaurants are chain restaurants and usually serve a particular type of food. The food may be a bit less healthy than home-cooked food, and it's often food from a different culture.
Yes, I was very much influenced by a teacher when I was growing up. I should begin by explaining that, as a child, I was really good at gymnasium, or rather gymnastics, and belonged to a regional club where I trained 6 days a week. As you can imagine, it was a big part of my life. As I was saying, I was good at gymnastics, and my teacher, whose name was Micah, influenced me a lot. She taught me how to be disciplined and focus on achieving long-term goals. I admired her and wanted to be like her when I was older. I've never thought about it before, but I think I achieved that.
As we're now in the final year of school, a lot of people are asking me about my plans for next year. Basically, I'm usually quite good at making plans, such as what to do in my free time, where to go, where to eat. However, making long-term plans is a little different. and I find that significantly more difficult, probably because I haven't got much experience of it. I think sometimes it's difficult to carry plans through to the end. Also, some plans are so much more important than others. Yes, I think that's the main reason. The awareness that some plans are life-changing makes it difficult.
Last week, just as the tiny and overpriced sunglasses I'd ordered finally turned up with the courier, I discovered they were no longer fashionable. I guess that's the way it's always worked. One minute an accessory will make you look super cool, and the next minute it'll make you look like a relic from a bygone era. I try to make smart purchases. I do plenty of online research whenever I have money to spend, and I visit lots of shops to get the best price and quality. But fashion moves too quickly. However, the good news is that fashions will often repeat themselves. When my parents were teens, they'd wear dungarees and flowers in their hair. In my grandmother's day, it used to be leopard print that showed you were fashion forward, and then, a few years ago, leopard print, denim dungarees and floral hairpieces all made a comeback. No doubt we'll see those tiny sunglasses I regretted buying back on the catwalk sometime soon. Of course, there are some things that we can only hope are well and truly consigned to the past decade. In my opinion, sandals are ugly enough, but combined with white socks? Once, many people might have thought that if you made a fashion faux pas like this, you would have to ensure that no photographic proof remained. However, while to many the word ugly sounds rude, fashion has recently reclaimed the socks and sandals look as a hyper-trend. Cheap and humble sneakers and shoes tell the world that you can be yourself and comfort is more important than looking pretty. Ugly is suddenly chic. As for personal grooming, the online chatter about hair, beards and moustaches was endless. The grey-silver look for young women came and went, as did shaving one side of the head. Think Miley Cyrus, Rihanna and Selena Gomez. It was men's hair, though, that was the most polarising. Full beard, stubble, goatee, man bun and beard combo. Styles would come and go and be ridiculed and admired in equal measure. I should know, my fashion-conscious older brother was constantly spending money at the barber and coming back with a new look. I never knew what to expect when he walked through the door. The last 10 years also saw people encouraging each other to do weirder and weirder things. The Ice Bucket Challenge kicked it all off, with friends inviting each other to dump ice over their own heads. While this particular challenge was intended to raise money for charity, its popularity prompted other people to come up with their own challenges, most of which were not exactly designed to put an end to world hunger or inequality. Another trend was the extreme selfie. People standing on cliff edges, tiptoeing towards large carnivores, dangling off bridges, falling into zoo enclosures. It seems that many amateur photographers will keep putting themselves in physical jeopardy in pursuit of the perfect picture. We've also seen the explosion of beautifying filters on social media recently, offering users an instant makeover. While these hugely popular filters may seem like a fun way to try out a glamorous look, studies show that for many people using them can end up damaging their self-esteem, as they measure their real face against unrealistic and false beauty standards. I can't help but hope that soon people will stop putting themselves at risk just for the likes and move on to something altogether healthier for mind, body and soul. Talking of moving on, isn't it time to admit that most movie franchises are well past their expiry date? My friends and I used to go to the cinema together to see the latest action movie on the big screen, but there isn't that same excitement anymore. Essentially, we've been revisiting those super spies, dinosaurs, lightsabers and killer cyborgs forever. Even the most avid fans are realising they're paying for the same old story with slightly different special effects. And while time seems to have moved slowly in the world of action films, dance-wise, there were some pretty interesting and short-lived moves. Gangnam Style, for instance, And of course, who could forget the floss? After a dancer named the Backpack Kid demonstrated the move in 2017, flossing soon went viral, even ending up as a victory dance on Fortnite. All these dancers suddenly found themselves in the spotlight and being sought out for interviews, for a brief time at least. Meanwhile, organising suddenly became cool, with influencers like Marie Kondo gaining millions of social media followers by showing how to be organised. And you'd hear people talking about how cool it was to fold their jeans in a special way and criticising others for being disorganised. You're always losing your house keys. Set a pattern for them. She would have a messy room, wouldn't she? She never tidies up. Experts have given a variety of reasons to explain this phenomenon, noting that millennials and Gen Zs seem to have bought into it more than any other age group. The consensus is that they're increasingly turning to structure at a time when the world around them can cause concern and anxiety. Although it's not something I find particularly cool, I can sympathise with people looking for a way to cope. Personally, all I need is a plate of avocado toast, but maybe that's no longer fashionable either.
Hi, I'm George Smith. Welcome to the Influencer Podcast, the programme that explores the stories behind some of the biggest influences in art and design. Today, we'll be discussing the artist Andy Warhol, who changed the art world by embracing celebrity and consumerism and became a symbol of the counterculture movement. We'll discuss why he was more than just an artist and why his work is still in vogue today. Our studio guest is Jade Nelson, an art historian and exhibition curator. The gallery where Jade currently works is in the heart of New York. Welcome, Jade. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, George. It's good to be here.
So, Jade, what do you think makes Warhol so popular?
Well, it depends what you mean by popular. When we say popular, do we actually mean famous? Warhol's art is certainly that. His bright, colourful pop art paintings are instantly recognisable. But there's more to it. Warhol himself became an iconic figure, as famous as his paintings. It's impossible to separate Warhol's work from Warhol the man. They are one and the same.
What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, Warhol was an innovator, a complete game changer. He was what we might refer to today as an influencer, even a disruptor. Warhol was fascinated by the idea of fame and celebrity, and he attracted media attention with his iconic silver wig and his taste in eccentric fashions. He used to hang out with rock and film stars, as well as politicians and society figures, which meant he was always in the public eye. Rather like Picasso, he wasn't just famous for his art, but for his whole persona, his looks, his personality, his friends. He was very recognizable. He became a brand.
So he became famous because he rubbed shoulders with the rich and famous?
That certainly helped, but his work is undoubtedly what makes him one of the most important and influential artists of his time. But the way Warhol packaged and marketed himself inspired icons such as David Bowie, who greatly admired his work, and wrote the songs Oh You Pretty Things, Kooks, Changes, and Andy Warhol about him. In fact, it was Warhol who inspired Bowie to create his own character, Ziggy Stardust.
Wow, I didn't know that. Would you say that Andy Warhol was ahead of his time?
Pretty much so. Way before selfies and reality TV, Warhol documented his personal life like an Instagrammer. He was always taking photos with his Polaroid camera and recording himself on a tape recorder. He didn't used to bother keeping up with fashion because he was the trendsetter. He bucked the trend at formal events, making it cool to dress down by wearing blue jeans with expensive shoes, jacket, and shirt and tie. And he liked to cause a stir and get noticed.
Oh, so he really liked appearing in magazines and newspapers. He sounds like some of today's celebrities.
Well, Warhol was a celebrity, and a talented one at that. He started his own magazine, Interview, and created an innovative interview style by making them more casual and chatty, and barely editing them at all. In my opinion, the magazine was like no other, as he got celebrities to interview other celebrities, so they'd reveal more to each other than they would have done to a journalist.
What about his art? Why do you think it has stood the test of time?
Andy Warhol was one of the leading figures in pop art, a movement that uses popular culture in art. Warhol brought a new approach to this movement with his series of iconic images of ordinary objects, including Coca-Cola bottles and Campbell's soup tins. He pushed the boundaries so that almost anything could be considered art. One famous piece is a set of boxes. He made the ordinary extraordinary, and in doing so inspired a number of current artists, including Damien Hirst and Cindy Sherman.
He was an artist whose work was truly innovative, wasn't he? So, can you tell me a little more about his fascination with celebrities?
It was a lifelong obsession, really. Warhol was a shy child who was captivated by movie stars and the silver screen. He used to go to the movies with his brothers and collect signed photos by writing to film stars. As an adult, he promoted celebrities known as Warhol superstars and inspired the expression 15 minutes of fame. The rock band that he managed and produced for a short time went on to be very successful. You may have heard of them, the Velvet Underground. In his art, he's probably most famous for the Marilyn Monroe portraits. You see that image reproduced a lot, but he painted many other celebrities throughout his life, including John Lennon, Mick Jagger, and Debbie Harry of Blondie. In fact, his work maps a timeline of important people and events. Ironically, his fame lasted much longer than 15 minutes, and his legacy lives on in history, pop culture, and the art world.
That's fascinating. So, tell me about the exhibition of his that you're currently...
Is it better to choose clothes in classic styles rather than going with passing fads?
Yes, well, I think buying classic clothes is a more socially responsible choice than trying to keep up with the latest trends. What do you think?
Yes, I agree. But don't you think it's a bit boring?
What do you mean?
Well, not everyone wants to dress like their mum and dad. I'm not a trendsetter, but classic clothes can be really dull. It's fun to try out new styles.
Perhaps to some extent. But don't you agree that we should all be buying clothes that are going to last for a long time? Choosing timeless classics is much more sustainable than buying disposable fast fashion.
Yes, I would go along with the idea that we need to buy less, but we all need clothes, and I think most young people would rather buy clothes that are on trend rather than classic styles. I mean, just the phrase, classic styles, makes me think of all those scratchy, stiff, uncomfortable fabrics that people used to wear. Ugh!
The problem is that trends move so fast. What's all the rage now will be out of fashion by next year. What's wrong with classic styles? They're classic for a reason. Practical, warm, well-made clothes that people will be able to wear for years. Good quality clothes are always in vogue.
But clothes are so much more than just things to keep yourself warm. They are a way of expressing yourself and how you want the world to see you. Do you want to say, I'm classic, or I'm innovative, creative and fun?
Yes, but I think the best designs often take classic styles and add a twist. This is only anecdotal, but I heard from a friend of my sister, who works in the fashion industry, that classic clothes are actually making a comeback right now. There's such a backlash against fast fashion that people are starting to embrace classic styles.
I see what you mean. Maybe dressing in classic clothes is a way of making a fashion statement. But perhaps we will have to agree to disagree.
Do you think marketing influences what people buy?
Oh, definitely. Advertising and marketing has a huge influence on people's behaviour. It's impossible to ignore it.
There's evidence to show that influencers also massively affect people's shopping habits. Can we consider influencers as a type of marketing?
Do you mean vloggers and celebrities?
Yes. Celebrity endorsements of a product can generate sales worth millions. That's why they get paid so much for advertising campaigns.
Yes, I think it's true that vloggers and influencers who have a high profile on social media are also increasingly important to brands.
I don't think I choose my clothes based on what I see on social media, though.
I'm not sure I agree with you on that. We are all influenced by people we admire. In fact, quite a lot of research has been done to back this up. It's often subconscious, so we don't realise the reason why we go for certain brands. When I was at school, studying history was knowing about things like the exact date of the fall of the Berlin Wall, or being able to recite all 6 of Henry VIII's wives. During one test, I suddenly drew a blank. Which 3 astronauts first stepped onto the moon? Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and, the passive memorisation of names, dates and facts, and the focus on invasions, revolutions, and the lives of kings and queens, made history a subject that felt irrelevant and remote, and as dead as the people of the past. But, in many classrooms today, the focus has shifted. Now students are expected to think more critically about traditional versions of historical events, and to consider their wider social and cultural implications, helping them to recognise that there have always been many stories, as opposed to one. Moreover, new technology and media have allowed us to gain fresh insights into history, bringing the past to life in really dynamic ways. Time Team was a popular TV programme that was helping to propel archaeology into the public consciousness. The specialists in the team spoke about each excavation with genuine passion and translated the science in a way that meant audiences felt engaged rather than alienated. An ancient iron nail, a tiny piece of pottery, a mud-encrusted gold brooch. At the beginning of each episode, the presenter Tony Robinson would ask who had owned the item and how it had ended up in that location. People wanted to know, and at its peak, the show was so popular that the ratings grew to 3.5 million viewers who wanted answers. Although Time Team no longer airs, its legacy remains. A new generation of archaeologists is digging up muddy fields, piecing mosaic fragments together, examining old bones and holding up their finds to the camera. Cutting-edge technology is helping us uncover even more of the past secrets. Colorado State University archaeologist Christopher Fisher and his team had been digging in Mexico at the site of an ancient and massive city hidden under jungle vegetation, when Fisher had a revelation. As he was walking around the site, which was 26 square kilometres and had as many buildings as Manhattan, it dawned on him that the excavation would take him the rest of his career, and he thought, there's got to be a better way. There was. Fisher and his team used LiDAR, a high-tech laser mapping technique, to reveal in breathtaking detail the 1,000-year-old city. Typically used on drones and military helicopters, LiDAR was also used by Australian archaeologists to discover and map vast medieval cities long buried in the forests of Cambodia. As well as lasers, archaeologists are using GPR, ground-penetrating radar, to enable them to see what's underground. Just north of Rome, archaeologists from the University of Cambridge used GPR to uncover an entire Roman city with no digging. The images showed incredible 3D shapes of public baths, theatres, shops and other structures. Although the use of equipment like LiDAR and GPR has caused an archaeology revolution, it doesn't mean that traditional, boots-on-the-ground, Indiana Jones-style excavation has become redundant, but it has certainly sped up the process. Other innovations also help to bring the past to us. Virtual reality, VR technology, is used by museums and heritage sites to allow visitors to go back in time and experience important historical events firsthand. You can walk around ancient Rome or get an up-close look at a Viking battle in all its 360-degree 3D glory. Computer-generated imagery, CGI, is another way of taking our understanding of history a step further by bringing cities, buildings, and even people back to life. The quality of the visualizations that CGI technology produces with realistic animation and 3D images helps make history more relatable, particularly to younger people. If innovations in technology are helping to make the past more exciting, they are also providing solutions to help conserve it for the future. The Roman baths in the city of Bath in the UK are an example. Glass walkways have been cleverly suspended above the Roman foundations so that no human foot will cause erosion. Lighting is deliberately softened, reflecting the moody atmosphere of a Roman sanctuary, and avoiding deterioration to artefacts that artificial brightness would cause. Before I visited last year, friends had advised me to expect snaking queues and rooms packed with slow-moving bodies. It was a description that turned out to be accurate. But the soundscapes and CGI reconstructions brought to life a Roman world beyond my expectations. I emerged in awe of this interactive journey. Many people believe that a good imagination is all that is needed to open a window into the past. But I suspect that the more we embrace the technology of the future, the closer we will become to our past.
I've watched all the seasons of The Crown several times. You see, I'm a huge fan of historical dramas. Recently, I found out that The Crown wasn't filmed in Buckingham Palace, but at Lancaster House, a historic building in London. Although Queen Elizabeth married Prince Philip in London's Westminster Abbey, that scene was actually filmed in a cathedral in the small city of Ely. Regardless of where the series was filmed, the places looked amazing, and so different to where I live. Anyway, I ended up booking a trip to the UK next year that takes in some key locations used in The Crown and other series. I can't wait.
I'm a costume designer from Korea, and I work mainly on Korean and Chinese TV period dramas. I really admire costume designer Anna Robbins. She's won awards for her work on Downton Abbey. In the film version of the series, Queen Mary visits Downton, and the designer wanted the Queen's jewellery to look authentic. Anna said she wanted viewers to feel like they'd seen Queen Elizabeth II wearing the same piece of jewellery. In contrast, she also talked about compromising on some of the outfits. The film is set in 1927, when the fashion was for shorter skirts and dresses. However, Anna decided that it wasn't appropriate for the aristocratic characters of Downton to show their knees, so the dresses were made longer. I think that's an important lesson for me to practice in the future, when to be authentic and when it's okay to bend the rules.
I'm doing an A-level in English literature, and to help bring some of the historical plays we study to life, we're encouraged to watch them being performed. It's expensive to go to the theatre, but we're fortunate that the National Theatre in London films National Theatre Live productions to show at cinemas around the world. In 2020, National Theatre at Home streamed a free production online each week. That was amazing. I watched all of them. After that, I was hooked. I didn't realise how much I love theatre. I'm even going to do a playwriting course next year.
That's about it for today's podcast. Next time, we'll be speaking to a psychologist and looking into everyday activities that are good for mental health. For example, researchers in the US say there are positive benefits from watching historical dramas. We'll be looking at the work of Dr. Pamela B. Rutledge, director of the Media Psychology Research Center in California, who has described period dramas as life simulations which show us different ways to be through themes universal to the human condition. The idea is that watching historical dramas allows us to escape from our day-to-day problems, helps us to improve social connections, and even develops better listening skills, all of which lead to positive mental health. Well, I will certainly be following Dr. Rutledge's advice and settling down for a weekend binge of historical drama.
I'm a software engineer from France, and I work from home for companies from all over the world. Recently, I've been working on computer-generated imagery, or CGI, for films. Only after working in this area do you realise how heavily the film industry relies on CGI. I love watching out for other films that use CGI to see what else is being done. I was really impressed by Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, which relies heavily on computer technology. Because the series is set in 1927, CGI was used to recreate the streets of Paris, London and New York from that era, using a combination of filming in real UK locations as well as on film sets. My favourite part of the film is the mythical creatures themselves, though. So much so that I'm going to read more fantasy novels.
Okay. Well, these photos have something in common. They all show inventors with their inventions. I'd like to talk about the photos of the printing press and the light bulb. The image of the printing press shows two men and a boy. I think one of the men is probably the inventor, Gutenberg. They're standing near the printing press. The other image shows a man standing next to a very large light bulb. He could be the inventor, Thomas Edison. There are several points of similarity between these images. For example, in both images, the inventors are dressed elegantly. However, Edison's clothes are quite different from the others. Both inventions were impactful. The printing press gave more access to news, information and education, while the light bulb turned night into day. The printing press led to the typewriter, whereas the light bulb changed the way we live and work. I think both inventions were just as important as the other.
Thank you. And now, Tobias, which invention do you think you couldn't live without and why?
That's tricky. I think I'm going to have to say the printing press, not only because I love reading, but also because of how it facilitated education. Could you imagine how difficult it would be if everything had to be written by hand? It would mean that most people, apart from the very wealthy, would remain illiterate and uneducated. So the divide between the rich and the poor wouldn't have changed. It also helped the advancement of science, as data could be copied accurately, so scientists could trust the information they received.
Thank you.